to all of you participants out there. And, it's early in the morning, people have to get to work. And therefore, when people spend time at this platform, it's because they find value or benefit. And thank you for organizing this. I also see some friends and colleagues, some all the way from Rwanda online already, and other parts of the world, which is quite refreshing. So you're all welcome, particularly the older people. I see my lecturer, Engineer Eric Odokunedu, and all the other people who helped to make us who we are today. And currently, I'm doing some work on OPRC contracts and asset management in the Republic of Liberia for Sofrico, France, and like you already heard. The topic for this morning is on output performance-based contracts. And I cannot say everything in one lecture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you sufficient understanding of the subject, but I will situate it in the area of performance-based contracts, first of all, so that when we have understood why it is like that, when we have understood why the world is moving in that direction, or the World Bank and other donors are moving in that direction, and the benefits, we will be able to now take typical project case study as I have promised to do. So if I'm not able to do it, maybe moderator, you will allow me to do the part one today, and then I will come to part two where I'll give you more specifics and also make comparison across countries, because I'm doing some research based on Liberia, Ghana, Rwanda, and Zambia, using specific examples of OPRCs and the differences between them and why they're doing them. So this is the outline of my presentation. I will give you some definitions or glossary. I will talk about why we do performance-based contracts. I will try to establish the main difference between the traditional contracting we do and performance-based contracts. But by performance-based contract, the specific is OPRC. But just for us to understand that performance-based contracts go beyond OPRC, and there are several shades and methodologies that can be used. I will give an overview of that, and then, like I said, we will then go deeper into OPRC itself. Then I will look at why people don't implement, or countries don't implement performance-based contracts, or what are some of the impediments, what are some of the fears that make people not want to do that. I'll look at advantages and disadvantages. Then I'll look at the roles, the role of the contractor or contracting entity, the client, the consultant. What are the roles in the traditional contract? What are the roles? OPRC, because I see that a lot of consultants and contractors are a bit confused about the role, and therefore sometimes they waste time doing what they are not supposed to do, and it affects the contract. Then I will share some key principles. So, what are performance-based contracts? Simply put, this is a way or an approach to contracting that provides disincentives or incentives, or both, to the contractor to achieve performance standards. Now here, watch, performance standards. Usually we build roads to specification. Here we are talking about performance standards or targets for measurable outcomes and sometimes outputs. So we are looking at performance standard, building roads to achieve performance standards or targets. And sometimes we mix them with measurable outcomes and sometimes outputs. I'll explain these terms. Now, the measures of performance are usually expressed in terms of the level of service, and level of service here, excuse me, I'm not talking about traffic engineering level of service, where we have level of service A, B, C, D, E, and F, which is congestion. We're talking about performance level of service in this particular case, referring to things like roughness on the road or the conditions of the road, maybe how long when a crash barrier is hit, it should be replaced, things like that. So when an asset suffers defects, how should be repaired, and the speed with which you repair, and what cannot be tolerated. or to outcomes of a particular type of maintenance service. Measures also expressed in terms of response time. So, for example, we can say that when there's a pothole or potholes of so and so meter square per kilometer, we don't want to. We want it to be fixed within the next 1 month when we have seen it. So it's a way of actually using performance to pay somebody or to pay his contractor or the contractor entity. And when he doesn't follow it, you penalize him in his payment. For example, if safety wise, his employees don't wear PPEs, you can penalize him. Or if he doesn't follow environmental things, then something can be deducted from the payment just to make him follow the standards that we have set for ourselves. So let's look at some important terms and definitions in this presentation. Of course, BOQ, we know a BOQ in a regular contract. Then we talk about DBMOT, design, build, maintain, operate, and transfer. This is a complete asset management solution that is applied in OPRCs. And here, the contracting entity, not contractor, contracting entity, designs, builds, maintain the road, operate it, and then transfer it at the end. So this is a complete asset management solution. Then FEDEC we know, so I won't go on that. And then road improvements. But of course, if you want the slides, I will give them to the chief so that in PDF so that you can read them. And then OPRC is output and performance-based road contracts. Now, it's important to understand outcome. When we say an outcome contract or outcome in a contract, payment is made on the basis of quality of the assets provided. So we pay for the road being a specific roughness. That is why we can define that when you build a road, we want the roughness to be, let's say, 2.5. And then we will measure that before we pay. Now, the contractor takes the risk on his own resources, the quality and quantity of work. So we can define what a contractor should do only based on outcome and then pay for it. Or we can also do output, where payment is made on the basis of the output delivered. For example, the dollars per kilometer for resurfacing or doing a certain activity or for patching. The contractor takes the risk on the resources involved and the quality of work, but not on the quantity of work. Then we mix them, we can mix them. And in OPRCs, you will see that it's a mixture of outcome and output because we want to get the most from this whole concept. Now, on your left side, you will see a report, which I'm sure when you Google, you can find. But if you can't find it, and you let me know, I can send you copy. But it's a World Bank transport paper, which is a review of performance-based contracting in the road sector from all over the world. A 2014 publication, and that gives you sufficient understanding of the state of knowledge and practice of performance-based contracting. But the emphasis is on OPRC. So here, OPRC is used as the performance-based contract interchangeably. Now, in this document, the experts put the whole OPRC concept of performance-based contract in 3 categories. 1, network management, where the road generally in a stable condition with elements of the network at various stages of their life cycle. And the focus becomes the delivery of maintenance and renewal with a notionally uniform level of work. There is no specific need for significant upfront investment. And the aim is to deliver the level of service and list of whole life cycle costs. So here you can give a whole network, maybe 300 kilometers of gravel road or paved road to contractor or contracted entity. And you give him the tax to manage the network, and you are only determining maybe the condition of the road in terms of some performance indicators. And then that is the basis on which he's paid. Now, we can also do design, build, maintain, operate, and transfer, where the network requires significant initial investment to bring up to an acceptable condition. So you have a road, you want to improve it, or you want to rehabilitate it. So you could use this, and they use the DBMOT model. Now, this situation is often associated with the history of poor construction quality, and the focus is to get better life for the assets being built, rather than necessarily the whole life cycle cost. So what we are really talking about here is that you are in a situation where you build roads, but government doesn't give you money to maintain the roads, or there is no money to maintain the roads. Then you can see that the roads we are building, when we build, after a long while, it deteriorates, it doesn't work. Then it stands to reason that if you adopt system where the road is built quality, designed well, built to quality, and the same team maintains it, operates it, and transfer it, a period of, say, 10 years or 12 years, but minimum usually 2 years to design and construct, then 5 years or 7 years to maintain. Then you can do periodic maintenance, routine maintenance, periodic maintenance with some overlay at the end, and then you transfer. Now, then there's another category, particularly for gravel roads, where you can do that. Now, as I said earlier, these incentives or incentive consist of reductions or increases in payment for respectively falling short or exceeding desired targets. Some disincentives or incentives are not necessarily tied to measurable outcomes or output. Like I said, your staff they haven't even signed a contract. So contractor employs staff, but sometimes they don't sign any contract. If it is part of the requirements that he's supposed to meet, he can be penalized. If he doesn't follow environmental rules, he can be penalized. So you define what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and then so you create incentives and disincentives. Now, these incentives and disincentives also include liquidated damages for failing to satisfy contractual provisions, an award fee for satisfying qualitative criteria, and a contract extension if the contractor performs well. So everything is put on the contractor or contracting entity so that he can be innovative to bring out the best. Now, why OPRC or performance-based contracting in this sense? Generally across the world, and particularly Africa, roads are built, and people are always complaining that the roads are not in good shape, they are not built well, and so many other things. And sometimes the roads are built well, but they are not maintained well. Or during the construction of the road, contractor doesn't care about the quality of the surface that people ride on. So you ask for him to concentrate on what he's building, but he doesn't care whether the road is trouble or is deteriorating further. He thinks when I get there, I'll fix it. So when we do OPRC or performance contract, we are trying to increase the level of service, not only for the asset that has been built, but even we can include aspects of the construction phase so that when the constructor is building the road, he cannot allow the level of service or a particular condition or a particular thing to happen on the road. So, for example, here in Liberia, we are doing a new road project. The government is financed by the bank. The government done the groundbreaking, and the contractor is supposed to already maintain the entire corridor and make sure that people can pass, goods can pass, nobody gets stuck, and then he's also supposed to do his work. And this is one of the ways to make the people benefit even before the road is finished. Now, here we're also talking about changing performance criteria from a focus on inputs, which is what we do in our traditional contracts, on outputs, to customer-oriented outcomes, customer satisfaction. So when we're doing this, we are more concerned about the customer, and at the end of the day, we want to be able even to do a study to show the impact the road has made to the people who use the road by using a questionnaire or some other means, not what the road provider is saying, but what the customers also think about what is happening. When governments or road authorities don't have enough money, then where they can to invest upfront, where they can structure a contract so that the contract is paid at intervals when it achieves certain milestones, then this form of contract becomes a very useful way of doing that. So, for example, a lot of contracts go through contract overruns, price escalation, all of that. Now, most performance contracts design them in such a way that before you qualify for uh, these kind of price escalation and what they call it issues, you should have completed certain quantity of work and then achieve a certain outcome so that the client is protected. So you learn from what you're doing, that you improve based on your local context and experience. Then there's a potential to reduce the agency cost because now you are bringing a contractor or contracting entity who is supposed to be very innovative in its design, innovative in its approach, efficient, and take responsibility for a lot of things so that he can even end up reducing the costs or the life cycle costs of the road and therefore the agency costs. Now, the response to the mandate of the executive branch or legislature to outsource more maintenance work or do more. So, for example, if you have like government wants to do more projects and he doesn't have a lot of money, but can get money at intervals, then there is a way you can outsource part of the network to performance contracting so that certain number of kilometers are under maintenance by OPRC, and it works very well. And sometimes you want to do more with less, therefore you do OPRC. Another reason is your ability to achieve expenditure stability, because when we are doing projects, sometimes the views, the variations become too much, and therefore you wonder why do we do what we're doing, and the payments become unpredictable. Now, it's also a more defensible way within a road agency to actually bargain with parliament or the government if they accept the performance-based method to use it to their benefits. Then it's a means of achieving a level of service for a long time. And of course, reduction in contract administration. Also, a key benefit is to shift risk or share risk. We heard the other day, I think 2 lectures ago, risk must be managed. And the party best fit to take the risk is the one who has to take particular risk. So here we think about sharing the risk or shifting it to the contractor. And it works very well because some things are business risk, so that the contractor does not delay the project and expect that he will be compensated with interest on delay payments and all those kinds of things. Potential to realize significant benefits from partnering with the agency and the contractor. So here, the agency, the road agency, the highway authority, and then the contractor becomes partners. We all have a common goal to build this road, and we work collaboratively. But at the end of the day, the responsibility is on the contractor. But the client has, or the client organization must make sure that he gets the most out of the whole situation. And if he plays his game well, then he will get the contractor to do a lot of things that ordinarily were not part of the initial contract, but have become necessary. And therefore, contractor may be persuaded to add a thing or two to the work and then do even things for the community that will factor in to the contract because they are not paying upfront and so on. And generally, it forces innovation. Now, I haven't said that this is what I teach my students, but let me give you some of the reasons why the World Bank is focusing on performance-based contracts or OPRC. One, he says they want to see designs that are so the World Bank finds increasing difficulties on the traditional West contract to ensure that design. So that's one of the reasons. So I just copied it from the SSATP presentation so that you see that this is the reason why the World Bank is doing what it's doing. That the quality of construction is adequate. They want good quality construction and at a predictable price. And the design must be thorough and well made. Then that the road is completed with the price given by the winner. Because most of our contracts, we sign a contract. Then by the time the road is finished, you will see that either we have doubled the value of the contract. So nothing is predictable anymore because either we didn't prepare the design well or we had not enough time to really do our investigations and we put the contract together. So OPRC gives you a way that the contractor has to take those responsibilities and make sure they are done properly. That the road is maintained after construction works are completed. All right, so OPRC is an option which is now available to countries to with the potential to resolve these problems, and there are many more that we can enumerate for traditional works contracts. Now, why are people not rushing to do OPRCs all over the place if there are benefits? One, lack of government support. Sometimes government and of course, even citizens think, if you start, why do you give 300 kilometers to one person? What are the rest going to do? So they don't, they influence politicians so that they don't support it. But if you understand it, there are ways to bring the local capacity into the whole thing and eventually let them do everything. Significant change in culture is required by the contracting agency and the contractor. Like I said, we are all used to the traditional contract. And now we have to change the way we do things. The rules are changing. The contractor is doing something different from what is supposed to do or we are familiar with. The role of the consultant is changing. The agency's role is also changing. And we all have to build a new culture. And that is why most countries, I believe that's even why Ghana has just started a few OPRCs. I mean, Liberia has been doing this thing for over 10 years. So a lot of projects, they've seen different aspects of it. They've gone through a whole cycle of design, build, maintain, operate, and transfer, which is going to end, was supposed to end this May, but it's going to end middle of next year. Now we have to make adjustments to go from method to performance. And that's very important. So now when we are specifying, we are more interested in performance, not just achieving outputs or the specification that is in our book. The inadequate experience with performance-based contracts or a negative experience on the first try. Sometimes people tried one, it didn't work because they did something wrong, and then they said they won't do it anymore. So they don't try. So many people who try something that didn't work. Sometimes it's not because the system doesn't work. Maybe they didn't package it well. Then they said, no, this thing will not work. But essentially a lack of training, because I see that in most countries, and Ghana is not different, had one or two seminars, then they started. Or people went to attend the course, then started. When you do that, you find out that sometimes you bring your old culture into the new and little problems, and then you think that the thing doesn't work. Of course, you need government authority to be able to go into this thing because you cannot be giving a lot of projects for making long-term commitments, 10 years, 12 years to one contractor. Political power may change. So you need legal authority to do that. And then big challenge with road authorities, how to predict the cost to know whether what the contractor is asking for is reasonable because he's going to do this thing for the next 10 years, build it, design it, build it, maintain, and operate for 10 years. We are not used to that kind of contract. We know how to make a BOQ and project the engineer's estimate. But when it comes to doing a life cycle cost analysis for a road project like this, most engineers have not been schooled in it. So then we don't know about it, then let's avoid it. And that seems to be the story. Okay, now there's also insufficient contractor capacity in most places, capacity to do the work, inability to achieve sufficient competition. Not many people can actually bid for an OPRC job. So you find that the Chinese are winning all over Africa, and our local people are not able to compete, and it's a problem how to make our bonds complete and create asset inventory. We don't have enough data on our system to be able to set good performance levels and all of that. So we want to shy away from it. Concern over loss of control over the methods, equipment, and materials. Imagine you want to give the whole road from Accra to Kumasi to one contractor to build it, operate, and maintain. He has to decide what equipment he will use, materials, design. I mean, a lot of people are not very comfortable because what we learned in school and we have practiced for 20 years, that's not how we've been doing it. We want to be able to know everything ourselves and control it ourselves. Now you have to hand over that to the contractor to use innovation. And we don't learn new culture. We can't do that comfortably. And therefore, it's an impediment. Then, of course, usually when we are designing the road, we are not mindful of the life cycle cost. We don't calculate it. So there's a concern that then the cost of doing the road over the life cycle of the road 20 years will increase and we will not have money, so we won't do it. But if we did it well, rather it should come down. Then fear that privatization will result in large number of staff having to leave the government organization. So if contractors are going to do the design, they're going to build and maintain, and we award 15 or 20 OPRCs. Now, what are we going to do in highway authority or it's a road provider or in the ministry? So then people are not sure. And they don't voice it out, but they don't support it and they don't move in that. So we don't get the benefit. But these concepts have been around first as concessions, road concession, PPP concessions, for more than 50 years. And in Latin America, there's so many projects that have gone through successful life cycles, but there have been few that didn't work. But like I said, if you read the report, you will see why some of them didn't work or some of them didn't work. It's that. Some of the advantages, potential reduction in cost has been established, improved level of service, transfer of risk to the contractor, more innovation, more integrated services, enhanced asset management, ability to reap the benefits of partnering between contractor and client, building a new industry, and achieving economies of scale so that you get a better network. Some disadvantages. The procurement process is long and costly. For getting contractors to make that commitment is difficult. Reduction in competition, uncertainties, challenges, and so on. So let me gain some time and skip some of the slides. So I want to now show some principles of PRC. So we've talked about it. The old approach is road by road fixing roads. The new approach is road sector efficiency. So let's manage the network. So we can give more roads to one contractor. Project lending, sector program financing. So you see, it's a complete change of approach, change in thinking, paradigm shift. Road engineer view, road user view, the new approach, good level of service. Completion of works and payment, provision of service level over long periods. Yeah, I would not want to give you a slide. You see that the traditional input based, you can talk about output, you can talk about performance. And if you look here, this one only talks about the work instructions. When we come here, we are talking about levels of service. Then here we extend it even of our community. And therefore, the users are now a central point, and we are more mindful of them. And then these are the relationships. So in our traditional contract, we have the asset owner or its representative, Ghana Highway Authority, contractor, and then maybe consultant. And these are how things work. Contractor just does implementation, consultant supervises and oversees whatever. Implement is there. Now, if you look at performance contract or OPRC, we have the contracting entity, client, and then the monitoring consultant. This is not a traditional consultant. His job is about 15% of the normal consultant who supervises the job. And therefore, there's a lot of confusion. What is he supposed to do? Sometimes he lets people there, they don't do anything. Then he doesn't have enough time to do it. He says, I need more time to do design review. It's not your job to do the design. So you must have a careful way of reviewing the design in 14 days. That's why they don't give you enough time. These are some performance measures that are commonly used, and I picked this in from the literature from the US, but generally these are standards that be applied. So any of these things can be used for the service level. So you can pick from here, pick from here, pick from here, pick from there, and so on. Now, here, contractor is paid to achieve service level. And this is defined in terms of how we can use the road, the speeds, or the surface condition, safety features, and then road side assistance. Now, specification included in the contract describe the service level, so the employer requirements. This time it's not just give me a road with this structural number and so on, but embedded there is the quality, but the service level is more important. And these are examples of service levels for paved and unpaved roads. And when it's supervision, this is different from the traditional supervision of contract. So it focuses on the performance criteria. So the job of the supervisor is to focus on this. He has to certify the work, but he needs to do enough checks to be able to know that what we are doing, we are achieving the right output, but is more concerned about the performance level. Now, it is much cheaper than a traditional supervision. So he's not supposed to spend as much time on the job. And therefore, he has almost about, let's say, generally 10%, but let's say 15% of what the traditional consultant is supposed to do. All right. And then contractor is paid installments or paid based on work done. And he's free to decide what to do, when to do it, how to do it, where to do it. So when he makes his program, we approve it, and then we monitor it. And then that is it. And these are the conditions World Bank is using, but the World Bank also is using an agreement with FIDIC and is using FIDIC conditions of contract to still combine with its own conditions of contract. So generally, studies have shown that these are the reasons why people select performance-based contract. But a lot of these ones I've gone through them earlier on, so I will not dwell on them at this stage so that we can ask questions. So when you want to monitor success, what are the key components? Quality of service, timeliness of responses, level of effectiveness, cost efficiency, and safety. These are the key areas where we check that the thing is working or not. And then risk, we'll talk about that later on when we have time. But if you look at the different ways we procure roads, from force account all the way to concession, and then we have the OPRCs in this category, you see that risk to the agency decreases and then risk to contractor increases. And that is food for thought. Sure, we'll have time to talk about some of the details later on. And these are some of the references. I picked something from this, and then this is a World Bank publication, and also have a lecture for asset management at KNUST, and I teach. This is road asset management, road performance-based road maintenance contracting, and that's where I picked the material from. Thank you very much.